This is the IK Multimedia iLoud sub, and somehow this small box is claiming it can go all the way down to 25 Hz.
I don't believe that.
So today we are going to find out, is this actually a serious studio subwoofer, or is IK Multimedia performing audio witchcraft? Let's go.
SK cooked this one.
First thing that immediately stands out is the size, because this thing is ridiculously compact. And if you are working from a bedroom studio, home studio, small production room, or even just a desk setup, you already understand why this matters. Because some studio subwoofers are basically like adding another piece of furniture to your room. You buy the subwoofer, then you realize you also need to buy a bigger room. But the iLoud sub can actually sit comfortably underneath your desk without taking over the entire studio. And considering the size, the specifications are kind of crazy. Inside, you've got a 6.5-inch high-performance woofer plus two 6.5-inch passive radiators, and the whole system is driven by a Class D amplifier with up to 200 watts of peak power. But here is the ridiculous part: the frequency response extends all the way down to around 25 Hz. How? 25! From this, some of my life problems don't even go that deep. And for music production, that matters because a lot of smaller studio monitors simply can't produce those very low frequency properly. So when you are mixing your kick, your 808, your sub bass, you might think everything sounds perfect. Then you play the song in a car with a proper sound system, and suddenly your bass has become the main artist. This is something important. A studio subwoofer isn't supposed to just make your room shake. You are not opening a nightclub. For mixing, the purpose is accuracy. You want to hear what is actually happening below the frequency range your monitor can comfortably reproduce, especially if you are producing things like Afrobeat, Amapiano, hip hop, EDM, cinematic music, anything with serious low-end information. Because if you cannot hear the bottom octave correctly, you are basically mixing it using faith. And faith is powerful, but maybe not for balancing an 808. Now, this is probably my favorite part of the iLoud sub. It comes with IK Multimedia ARC measurement microphone and ARC X room correction system. And this solves one of the biggest problems with adding a subwoofer to a small studio, because bass frequency interacts with the room in very strange ways. That is because of room modes, cancellation and reflections. And simply buying a more expensive speaker doesn't magically remove those problems. What ARC X does is measure what is happening in your listening position and calibrate the monitoring system accordingly. And here is the really interesting part: the iLoud sub can calibrate itself and your connected studio monitors, and your monitors don't necessarily have to be IK Multimedia monitors, so you can integrate this with other speakers. That is a huge advantage. Around the back, you've got plenty of connections options. You've got balanced XLR connection, RCA, USB digital audio, and even Bluetooth. So this doesn't necessarily have to live exclusively inside a professional studio setup. You can use it with a desktop listening system, entertainment setup, or just stream music through it when you are not mixing. Although personally, if I'm spending this kind of money on a studio subwoofer, this thing is working, no holidays. Now let's talk about the important part: the sound. This first thing that surprised me wasn't necessarily how loud the bass was, it was how controlled it sounded. Because there is a difference between, oh, this speaker has a lot of bass, and I can actually understand what is happening in the bass. With the iLoud sub, you can start hearing details in the low end that smaller monitors can easily hide. So who should actually buy something like this? If you have each studio monitors already capable of giving you reliable low frequency extension, you might not need it. And if your room has absolutely zero acoustic treatment, adding more low and without understanding your room can also create problems. But if you are working with small near-field monitors in a bedroom studio or compact production setup, this becomes very interesting, especially if you are constantly checking your mixes in the car because you don't trust what you are hearing below 60 Hz or 70 Hz. This could solve a very real monitoring problem. Of course, there is one obvious problem. At around $599, This is definitely not a cheap little speaker, but you are also getting the subwoofer, the measurement microphone, and IK Multimedia ARC-X calibration ecosystem. So you are not paying for more bass, you are paying for better control over the bass, and that is an important distinction. So is the IK Multimedia iLoud sub worth it? For everybody, no. But for producers working in smaller studios, particularly with compact monitors, I think this is one of the more interesting subwoofer solutions I've seen. Because IK Multimedia didn't just make a small subwoofer that goes boom boom boom. They actually address one of the hardest problems with adding a subwoofer to a small room: integration and calibration. Small footprint, 25 Hz extension, 200 watts peak, automatic room calibration, and compatibility with monitors from other manufacturers. That is a pretty serious package. Although I'm still slightly offended that something this small can produce frequency this low. IK Multimedia, we need to talk, or let me say physics, we need to talk. Let me know what you think. Would you actually use a subwoofer in your studio, or do you prefer mixing with your monitor and headphones alone? Drop it in the comment section. And if you want to see me actually use this thing in a proper mixing session, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.